Welcome back, listeners, to a new episode of The New Standard. And as always, I have my partner in crime, Neil Coulong. What's up, Big Neil?
Training camp season, Lance. We're excited here on the New Standard podcast. We've got news and notes to go over. It's a big day overall, not anything in particular. As we chatted about offline, though, Lance, isn't it crazy? The Hall of Fame game is tomorrow,
Yeah, we got some football
Thursday, August
tomorrow.
3rd. That's
Yeah.
that's crazy. It's the Browns versus somebody that doesn't matter any more than the Browns do, I'm sure. But the thing that gets me is that former 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 Vikings training camp failure and point of controversy, Kellen Mond will start under center for Cleveland. He might perform better than Deshaun Watson did for the time that we saw Watson last season.
I know for the amount of that contract, the Cleveland Browns are thinking that better not be the case. But of course, Cal football will not play. Uh, and when I say Cal football, I say Aaron Rodgers. He's currently typing on his keyboard, pretty pissed at Sean Payton. So, because Sean Payton broke the code according to,
The
Aaron
code.
Rodgers. But anyway,
Don't
don't.
you love that? I think that's a segment that's worth breaking out, Lance. I thought it was hilarious. Nathaniel Hackett, who is objectively at least a very strong candidate for worst head coach in NFL history, getting the job with the Broncos to begin with over a lot of people that are probably more qualified than he was. More than likely, it was an effort for the Broncos to lure Aaron Rodgers to play for them. He's complaining that another NFL head coach violated a code. It's like, oh man, you make this so easy for people. What a joke! Like you
Yeah.
don't realize the code you just violated,
Yeah,
Nathaniel. Do you
being
realize that? You knew there
being
was
an
controversy surrounding your hiring, right?
yeah.
What a what an idiot!
Yeah, well,
That whole
yeah.
thing is just hilarious to me. I thought Sean Payton's comments. Nobody has said that he was wrong because he wasn't. I thought they were very pointed, very funny. He delivered it in a very comedic way. He absolutely shouldn't have done it considering what his position is, but he's just coming off the Fox desk. You do those kinds of things when you're on camera. You can't do that now. He apologized. Get over it. It wasn't that big of a deal
Yeah,
because at the end of the day, nobody can tell me Nathaniel Hackett did even remotely anything close to a good job last season. You just can't.
no,
He's going to get ripped on for it. Should he even have an offensive coordinator job right now? I wouldn't have hired him. I don't know how anybody would
no,
have. I don't care if Aaron
no,
Rodgers wants to.
he was Matt Canada esque, but not to riff too far. As always, listeners, you can enjoy the experience on YouTube, the new standard. Also, you can go to wherever you get your podcast and do a search for Steelers and the new standard. Welcome everybody to the show. Neil, let's jump into something real quick. The Ring of Honor. The names for the Steelers Ring of Honor was announced last week. James Harrison, Aaron Smith, Ray Mansfield, and Jerry Mullins. I wanted to say one thing that came to mind, and I want you to do the same about each player. So when I think of James Harrison, the first thing that comes to my mind is Debo. I think of Friday. I mean, he's the most intimidating man I've ever seen in my life. When I think of Aaron Smith, I think of Aaron Smith as an absolute monster, a tactician. I think Aaron Smith was one of the best guys I've ever seen use his hands as a defensive lineman. I thought his hand usage was absolutely outstanding. Ray Mansfield, I think he was the starter of an excellent run of centers. You go from Mansfield to Webster to Dawson to Pouncey. I mean, that just becomes center you. And speak to Mullins. I don't know much about Mullins. I know he was a versatile player, played during the Steel Curtain era, was a very good offensive lineman, but I can't speak too much to Mullins. What's your thoughts on the men that were inducted into the Steelers Ring of Honor?
I'll try to boil this down as quickly as I can. There are personal connections for me with this. As a young pup, brand spanking new school newspaper reporter at North Dakota State University, the fall of 1998, my first assignment was covering an NDSU football game against Northern Colorado. In the Fargo Dome, the school newspaper sat at like the absolute end of the press row, and there were about 30 empty seats between the student reporter and all the other real reporters. They also happened to put scouts down where the school reporter sat. This game happened to be attended by a scout by the team formerly known as the Washington Redskins. He was sitting next to me, and I happened to notice his credential that he was an NFL scout. This was the coolest thing in the world to me. I was 18 years old. I probably talked to him far more than he would have wanted me to, and we were enjoying our press box nachos and hanging out. I eventually got him to tell me that he was there looking at this defensive tackle for Northern Colorado named Aaron Smith. I'm thinking immediately, like, wow, this guy could play in the NFL for real. So I sat watching the guy the entire game, nothing to do with my assignment at all. But I'd ask him questions about everything like that. He also mentioned his hand usage, by the way. That's where I learned about that technique as far as the value of it for a base defensive end, which is what Washington was looking at him for. It's certainly a 5 technique defensive end within a 3-4 defense. But I was the walking encyclopedia on everything Aaron Smith after that game. It was just the coolest thing in the world, to a point where the first interview I ever did as a member of media anywhere was with Aaron Smith after that game.
Nice.
I requested it through the SID, the sports information director, like you do. And I sent in my sheet. I didn't want to talk to any NDSU player. I only wanted to talk to this guy. I remember the SID looking at me like, what are you doing? I didn't know, honestly. I was like, okay, I probably screwed something up, but whatever. I want to go talk to this guy because he's going to play in the NFL. And I sat outside their locker room for probably a good 5 minutes, and then out comes Aaron Smith, and he's still in his jersey, and he's got the weirdest look on his face, like, what the fuck are you doing talking to me? And he was honestly like the most humble, nicest guy you would ever talk to, and that would be his reputation when he went into the NFL. But I asked him a bunch of questions about the NFL, and he wasn't answering any of it. He wanted nothing to do with that, to the point where eventually they said, all right, we're done. We got to go, whatever. And he took off. But I'll tell you what, I knew absolutely everything about the guy that anybody would have wanted to know. And when the Steelers drafted him that spring, I went through the roof. I wasn't a bigger Aaron Smith fan than me anywhere. To see him have the career that he had, and now to be inducted into the Steelers Hall of Honors, it makes me feel really old, but it just makes me feel nostalgic for his entire career, because for stupid reasons that don't mean anything to anybody but me, I just felt like I was a part of that. I knew him when he was 21, 22 years old. But just a phenomenal story, and he earns every bit of reputation that he gets. It almost becomes a badge of honor to say he's the most underrated player. He can't possibly be underrated if everyone all says he was underrated,
Yeah.
He just wasn't a big sack guy, but as far as technical mastery, as far as playing a role, there are very few Steelers defenders who played their role better than Aaron Smith did. And that's no joke.
Yeah.
Don't tell me Brett Kiesel, even Cam, I would put at that level. From a technical level, Aaron Smith mastered that position. He was as good a 5 technique defensive end as the NFL has ever seen. Extremely excited for that.
Yeah, he's a guy definitely. Had he self-promoted more, is a poor man's, in my opinion, Hall of Famer. And I think it comes to self-promotion a little bit sometimes when it comes to Hall of Fame and sacks, because sacks jump off the stat sheet. But he was a whale of a ball player. But let's shift reels, and congratulations again to all those men: James Harrison, Aaron Smith, Ray Mansfield, and Jerry Mullins. Let's jump into the catch before we jump into the main topic of the show, Tae Kwon Do. And again, listeners, you are checking out the new standard. What was your thoughts? And of course, the catch. I think everybody in Steeler Nation has probably seen the best catch that does not count, but counts in practice: the George Pickens catch against Joey Porter Jr., where he ridiculously shifted his entire weight, high point of the ball, made the catch, handed Jerry Porter Jr., JPJ, the ball. Everybody celebrates. Here's my thought on the catch, and we talked about this last year. I didn't see a lot of separation between him and Joey Porter Jr. I don't think a diet can be made of combat catches alone. I think at some point I'd like to see George Pickens create some separation. And the other thing, in terms of that rep, I thought the coverage by Joey Porter Jr. was fantastic. If you make someone have to do that to catch a ball who's as athletically gifted as George Pickens, I think that bodes well for the Steelers. So overall, I thought it was a very good rep on both sides. The other thing that stood out, I thought the throw was bad. I don't know who threw the football, but
It was Kenny.
I thought it was a good rep by both players. And interesting perspective, Neil. What's your thoughts on that? And how do you think that rep would be graded out?
First, I thought it's truly one of the most insane catches I've ever seen.
Yeah, absolutely insane.
It just goes to show, and I've frequent listeners of this show know I've been pounding the table for George Pickens since the nanosecond that he was drafted. And the only reason I didn't say it before that is because I didn't think there was a way in the world the Steelers were going to take him. I didn't think he would fall to where they needed him to fall. They weren't going to take him in the first round. He is just a phenomenal athlete. Absolutely phenomenal. I equated this to some coworkers yesterday. If we flip it over to baseball and you look at a center fielder, the best defensive center fielders have an amazing ability to track the ball in the air. And there are really different eye perspectives that you have to have when the ball is rising through the air versus when the ball is falling. George Pickens, I am honestly convinced, would be one of the best center fielders in the game if he had played baseball. He tracks a ball like nobody in the NFL. He really does. It is without question his highest and best ability. I know he makes the one-handed catches and he really likes all that. That's circus entertaining. As far as football talent goes, his ability to know exactly where his body is going to be when that ball falls and to position himself to compete for 50-50 balls at an abnormal rate, to have success at an abnormal rate, it's remarkable. And the thing of it is, he is not a nuanced route runner at this point. Keep that in mind, because you're exactly right. He didn't get open on that play. And I would argue everyone makes fun of Pickett's throw. It's a back shoulder throw. The reason Pickens made it, the effort that he had to put in, is because Porter was exactly where he was supposed to be. And it's not as if Porter gave up, but he kind of stands there because he doesn't know where the ball is. He just knows that Pickett swum around him and turned his body like 270 degrees to jump up and reach out with his non-dominant arm and somehow pull that ball in. It's impossible. Not that it matters. It's not pure football. It was a hell of a lot of fun to watch, and the reaction was entertaining as well. If anything, I would say Pickens, he ran a pretty simple go route. It's not for grading the result. Keep that in mind. They're really putting him out there for competition, for technique work with the defensive back more than anything. It's pure one-on-ones, pure man coverage, with no pass rush at all, no help over the top anywhere else, no other receivers that might get in the way. Usually the receiver's probably going to win that drill. Porter, I felt his technique, he mirrored him well. He got his hands on him. He rode him to the outside like you're supposed to. He used the sideline as a defender. He's still got his hands on him about 12 yards down the field. That's one of the knocks on Porter. Perhaps this was a reason he fell to the second round. You got to worry about that in the NFL. Are they going to call it? I don't know. We've seen them not call that. We've seen them call it. I hate getting into, well, that'd be a flag. It's practice. That's not what they're trying to do. Don't get too hung up on the results of it. A little handsy, but I think what you see with him is a very strong press coverage rep. He does exactly what he's supposed to do. He gets his hands into Pickens before Pickens reacts off the line. That's a good sign. Then he rode him out. I mean, Pickens is trying to get around him, but Porter uses his leverage and drives him to the sideline. You want to make that window as small as humanly possible for that ball to go in. And Pickett at that point doesn't really have anywhere else to go with the ball except under him. So he's going to throw it back shoulder. No need to criticize the throw. There isn't another option. He has to throw the ball there. That's probably the highest percentage place he could throw in order to get a completion. And Pickens made a phenomenal effort to make that play. It was a fun rep overall. It looked like Porter got a little bit of a talking to for throwing the ball back at Pickens, probably because we just would have got a 15-yard penalty for that, wipe out the play completely for what Pickens did. You negated that. So don't be stupid. Don't react to that kind of thing. Once again, it's practice. It's not designed for results. Did he get separation? No, but when you're facing press man and you're taking the guy on a fly, you got to be some hell of an athlete to get a large amount of separation on that if you're bending around him. He's representing it like he's inside the numbers. If he's outside the numbers and it's one subtle move and he's going straight, sure. Pickens had to go out a bit and get up the sideline. That eats up your time. Any speed advantage you might have is going to be gone for that kind of thing. It's not a pure fly. It's more like a wheel. It really is to get two players downfield and probably more for work for the defensive back than it is for the receiver. I wouldn't get caught up too much in that, but it was a good competitive rep. You like to see that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very good for, something to watch during this time when there's not a ton or you're not being exposed to a ton. I thought it was a good competitive rep between both of them. You could definitely see iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a nice competitive camp for those two. And, you're going to get good work. They're going to both get good work from working with each other. But the title of today's program is Tae Kwon Do. And of course, the Steelers signed Quan Alexander, former linebacker for the San Francisco 49ers and the New York Jets. Let me read you some of his PFF scores because I want to get your thought. It was interesting when we first talked about Quan Alexander, about your thoughts about him and the significance of the signing. Looking at some of his PFF numbers, they look pretty similar actually to Holcomb. Overall, he was ranked 47 in terms of run defense, ranked 51st. Pass rush, had a very good pass rushing grade, ranked about 15th, was 51st in coverage. Interestingly enough, Holcomb's numbers are about the same. The difference between the two in terms of their numbers is pass rush. When I look at Alexander, from my recollection of looking at him as a player for the Niners, a run and hit guy, an athletic guy, a guy that can bring some juice to the position. What's your overall impression of him as a player? And in your opinion, why do you are the Steelers searching? I mean, they signed 3 inside linebackers. Are they searching? And do you think Mark Robinson is still in their plans?
I think after Quan signed before they even put pads on, but after camp was pretty well underway. To me, and I don't know this for fact, but to me, that strongly suggests they didn't see what they wanted to see out of Mark Robinson early enough to say that he can be that guy as a reserve backer. At the same point, though, they had conversations with Quan Alexander well ahead of camp. So I think there might have been, perhaps there's interest from another team. The Steelers were still interested, but they're kind of forced a little bit earlier than maybe they would have liked because he's a linebacker. You can't really evaluate a whole lot before you have pads on. So I would think it might have been a combination of those things, but you really can't find a scenario in which it suggests they're confident in Mark Robinson's ability to back up both positions. And Alexander's a vet. He knows what he's doing out on the field. The big knock on him, I mean, he went to a Pro Bowl in his second year in the league, and he was an outstanding player. And then he played less than half of every game possible for the next 5 years or something like that. Steelers clearly don't seem to be all that concerned about past injury statuses of the veteran players that they're signing. I will see if that's a bad thing or not, but I think you can get value out of Allen Robinson at $5 million a year, just like I think you can get value out of Quan Alexander, who I believe signed a minimum deal. It's a matter of who's going to go where. Now, do I think Alexander is in line for a large bulk of snaps? I don't. But as I've said, many times here, Lance, I don't think they're going to play traditional inside linebackers anymore. I think they're going to play some look of a 4-2-5 as a base, which is what they've been doing for the last several years now. But I think they're going to use these linebackers with the exception of Holcomb, they're going to use them with more of pass coverage in mind about what zones they can cover and can they still stay a little bit bigger against the run. It's more what he can bring in a specialized package situation than it is what he can do 3 downs across 80 snaps a game, which I highly doubt he would play.
I'm gonna rephrase this question because I know you hate it when I say starter, and that's just me. I'm old. I'm 53. I know I don't look 53. I know I look 32. But anyway,
32 is high.
Yeah,
You're like 29.
But with that being said, I know you hate the term starter. So let's look at it in terms of distribution of snaps. Let me make it sound a little more snazzy. Snap distribution.
Snap distribution.
It always sounds better when you say
it's just more accurate. That's all. I mean,
snap distribution.
Somebody has to start, but that doesn't mean that is the dude. If the starter goes and another backer at his same spot plays 35 snaps to the starter's 25, does it matter if he started? He didn't play as much. That's relatively equal, though, and that's the point that I'm getting at. I think they're trying to balance the position out because they're going to do a lot of different things, and they're just look at the makeup of the linebackers that they have in there. None of them are probably not going to excel in a 3-down role. I don't think that Holcomb, the guy they gave all the money to, is necessarily far from that, and maybe he does, but I think there's going to be a lot of situations where they've got one inside linebacker on the field, and they need role players beyond that. Quan Alexander is probably better in coverage than Mark Robinson is. Mark Robinson's probably better against the run today than Alexander is. So you can use them in different situations. That's what they're trying to build. That's why they don't have like a marquee guy. They don't need a Devin Bush wannabe prospect to have to play 3 downs because of his status. They can underpay for veteran talent to come in and just play in situations.
So let me ask you this. Let's just make it easy. 60 snap game, and that's probably light. But it's even. It's a nice round number. 60 snap game, Holcomb, Alexander, Roberts. The three that they
which one would have that?
No. In a 6, let's say the game is 60
snaps.
Oh,
the game is 60 snaps.
And let's the snap distribution.
I don't want to get too far in the weeds. It really would depend on who they're playing and what they're looking to do. The reason I say that is because out of nowhere, Mark Robinson plays a good amount of snaps against the Ravens last year because the Ravens were a dominant run team and they wanted to ensure that they could stop that. Devin Bush couldn't stop Water from running uphill anymore. They were done with him. So they started Robinson for that particular game. Now, how well he did, it's a different story. Made a couple plays, had some bad plays, but a young prospect who's building up. If you're facing a run-heavy team, perhaps Robinson plays a little bit more. We know that. Overall, I would say Holcomb is probably going to be the closest to 60. I would think it'd be maybe right at 60, between 55, 60, somewhere in there. But I think there's plenty of room for Roberts, Robinson, and Alexander to split what is left based on who they're playing. But I would think sitting here right now, 2 and 3 would be Roberts and Alexander. That's just my guess here, August 2nd.
I think it's a great way to look at it. I think in terms of looking at it, the best way to look at it is that they have options. They have options based on the opponent of the 4 different guys that they can rotate. Holcomb, of course, will probably play the most snaps due to the contract. Let's shift reels into the last segment of the program, but I am impressed that the Steelers were still trying to be aggressive in free agency, and I don't think it's a bad thing to go out and get a guy like Quan Alexander. I think you bring more pieces to the pie. You bring more tools in your toolbox, so to speak. You add more to this defense, more depth, and more versatility and the ability to do more things on defense, because I think it's going to be critical for this defense to play well. I want to jump into the last segment of the show, and of course, everything revolves around Kenny Tropolis. The universe centers around the gravity that Kenny Pickett produces, and rightly so. Uh, Mike Sando does a very good article about his quarterback tiers, where he gathers a lot of information from GMs, from coaches, and he creates these tiers of quarterbacks, tiers 1 through 5, and he typically puts 30 guys in those tiers. Of course, tier 1 being the best, and that's Patrick Mahomes is in tier 1 with Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers, so to speak. So that's his article. His article is very good. He put Kenny Pickett in tier 4, and tier 4 is defined as an unproven player with not enough info, or a veteran who ideally would not start all 17 games. Also, he pointed out that the league thinks Kenny Pickett is a low trait guy, meaning physical traits, but a high intangible guy. And they had Kenny Pickett slightly rated slightly under Brock Purdy. I think Brock Purdy was 24. Kenny Pickett was 25. That's a short that I did asking, who do people think are better, Kenny Pickett or Purdy. Do you agree with Mike Sando's assessment or the league's assessment, their thoughts of Kenny Pickett as a low trait, high intangible guy? And where do you see and how will camp improve Kenny Pickett going into this second year?
I think I've said this since Pickett was drafted. He is the sum of his whole is greater than the sum of his parts. He does not have great traits. He's reasonably mobile, but not a difference maker in that regard. Reasonable arm, not a great arm. I like his downfield accuracy. I think he's going to improve on that. But what I love about Kenny Pickett is the dude has balls. He plays the game hard. He's a leader. He gets more out of the guys around him than, we saw Mitch Trubisky get out of anybody last season. He has guts, that's valuable. And I promise you, Mike Tomlin is huge on that aspect of his game. You don't need to have, the cannon arm to become a great quarterback. If you know where to go with the ball, you can throw accurately and you can put it on a good spot with, some reasonable velocity, you can have success. Now, are you going to be a killer like Justin Herbert? No, but Justin Herbert was drafted, 5 overall, 6 overall, something like that. There are a lot of reasons why a quarterback is going to succeed. Kenny Pickett is not going to do it through sheer force of talent. He's going to do it through smarts, through toughness, through intelligence, accuracy, with a good deep ball on top of that. How I would say this, though, the way the tier is described is perfectly fair right now for
I think
where
so
he is.
too.
He's a young player. We haven't seen quite a whole lot yet. I think people need to really understand who Brock Purdy is and what system he was playing in, because frankly, George Kittle was not on the Steelers last season. They did not have Christian McCaffrey or Deebo Samuel. Trent Williams was not their left tackle. Okay.
He was in a great situation.
Kyle Shanahan set him up beautifully, did a great job. I'm not trying to take anything away from Brock Purdy, but Brock Purdy, his quarterback rating when the receiver was 4 or more yards open was like 150. And then when it was anything less than 4 yards, it was like 75. In other words, he knew where to throw the ball when the guy was completely wide open. It's good. You scheme that up, though. That's not the quarterback, doing great things with tight coverage. Pickett had to do a lot more with a much junkier offense than what Purdy did. But, I think we're splitting hairs when we're talking about 23 versus 24. The description is fair for Pickett right now. I don't have any problem with that at all. It's reasonable. We saw Pickett play really well in 4 games last season. We saw him play terribly in 4 games last season. That's who he is right now. Camp gives him the ability to calm down, to absorb everything that's going on, to build on a foundation that he's already built, which are probably the most frustrating parts of his career. really learning everything, learning everybody, understanding the terminology. He gets to iron all of that out. He gets to improve on that now. He's already built the basement. Now he's building the skyscraper upwards. That's what you want. And that's camp does a lot of that for your quarterback. I think we'll see him playing at a bit better level right off the bat than what we saw last season. And that's going to be a great thing for a team that started very poorly the last 2 years, if not longer.
And I think that's going to be key as we conclude the show because they got a very tough opponent in the San Francisco 49ers in that first game. And that's going to be a great gauge to where he is. But with that, Neil, we're going to conclude the show. You got anything else you want to say or want to put out there?
That's it, man. I'm just looking forward to whenever the first preseason game is.
Yeah,
New Standard podcast is going to be here throughout. We're just gearing up.
Absolutely. So thank you, everybody. Again, you're checking out the New Standard. And thank you, everybody, for participating in the program. Thank you, everybody who was on the program live. We're going to go ahead and get out of here. And as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe.